Princess Gia stood at the large window of her royal chambers. She watched the three suns of her home planet rise in the morning sky. Their light made her skin shine with different colors. Unlike humans, her people had skin that changed color with their feelings. Right now, it showed a calm blue. Her four arms moved in a graceful pattern as she did her morning exercises. It was an important day. Her father, Emperor Da, had called for a special meeting of the Royal Council. She did not know why, but she felt it was about her. "Princess, it is time," said her helper, Yuma, bowing low. "The Emperor is waiting." Gia nodded. "Thank you, Yuma. I am ready." She wore her best royal clothes. They were made from the finest star silk, woven from the webs of space creatures that lived in the rings around their planet. Her headpiece showed her rank as first princess of the Celestial Empire, the oldest and most respected power in this part of the galaxy. The walk to the council room was long. The palace was huge, with high ceilings and walls that seemed to move and breathe. It was alive, in a way. All important buildings in the Celestial Empire were grown, not built. That was one more thing that made them different from the newer races, like humans. Gia thought about humans as she walked. They were so strange. They had only 2 arms. Their skin did not change color. They could not hear each other's thoughts, and they had only started traveling in space about 100 years ago. The Celestial Empire had been traveling among the stars for thousands of years. Yet humans had spread quickly. They had made friends with some races and fought with others. They had shown they were good at making new things, at fighting, and at talking their way out of trouble. They were now an important part of galactic politics, even if many older races looked down on them. The council room doors opened for Gia. Inside, 12 of the most powerful people in the empire sat around a round table. In the center was her father, Emperor Da. His skin was the deep purple of royal power. His 4 eyes looked at her with love, but also with something else. Worry. Determination. "Daughter, thank you for coming," the emperor said. "Please, sit beside me." Gia bowed and took her place. She noticed someone else in the room, standing to the side. A human. He wore the uniform of the Terran Alliance, the government that represented Earth and its colonies. He was old for a human, with gray hair and lines on his face. "Council members," Emperor Da began, "I have called you here to announce a decision I have made for the good of our empire." The room was quiet. The Emperor's word was law. "For too long, we have watched the Terran Alliance grow stronger. They now control trade routes near our borders. They have weapons that can match ours. We have 2 choices: prepare for war or make peace through a strong alliance." Gia felt her skin begin to change from blue to a worried yellow. She did not like where this was going. "I have spoken with Ambassador Lee of the Terran Alliance." The Emperor pointed to the human, who bowed his head. "We have agreed that the best way to ensure lasting peace is through a royal marriage." The council room buzzed with surprise. Jia's skin turned completely yellow now. "My daughter, Princess Gia, will marry the ambassador's son, Hyun. This will join our families and our peoples." The yellow of Jia's skin suddenly flashed to angry red. She could not believe what she was hearing. Marry a human. It was unthinkable. "Father," she said, standing up. It was not proper to speak out in council, but she could not help it. "You cannot be serious. A human. They are barely more than animals." The council gasped. Ambassador Lee's face showed no emotion, which impressed Jia for a moment, but not enough to calm her anger. "Princess Jia," her father said, his voice firm, "you forget yourself." "No, father, you forget who we are. We are Celestials, the first race. How can you ask your daughter, your heir, to lower herself to marry a creature with only 2 arms, no mind speech, and a lifespan not even a quarter of ours?" The Emperor's skin darkened to a dangerous deep purple. "Enough." His voice echoed with power. The council members looked down. Even Jia took a step back. "You will do as I command, daughter. This is not a request. It is your duty to the Empire. Jia felt trapped. Her whole life, she had been taught that duty came first. But this was too much. Father, I'll marry anyone but the human, she said, her voice breaking. The Voidborn Prince, the Quantum Collective representative, even a methane breather would be preferable. Ambassador Li cleared his throat. If I may, Your Majesty, perhaps the princess would like to meet my son before making such strong statements. The Emperor nodded. A wise suggestion, Ambassador. Princess Jia will meet your son tomorrow. I will not. Jia's skin was now bright red with anger and embarrassment. You will, her father said quietly, or you will lose your place as heir. The council room went completely silent. This was no small threat. If Jia was no longer heir, she would lose everything, her position, her powers, her future. Jia looked around the room. All eyes were on her. She knew she had no choice. As you wish, father, she said coldly. I will meet the human, but do not expect me to agree to this arrangement. With that, she turned and left the council room, her four hands clenched into fists. Back in her chambers, Jia threw a crystal vase against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. How dared he? She shouted. Yuna stood quietly in the corner, waiting for the princess's anger to pass. A human. Can you believe it, Yuna? Me, Princess Jia of the Celestial Empire, married to a human with their ugly pink skin and their primitive ways. Perhaps he will not be so bad. Princess, Yuna suggested carefully. Not so bad. They live only 120 years. By the time I reach the middle of my life, he will be dead. And what about children? Is such a thing even possible between our kinds? Jia paced the room, all four arms moving in agitation. Her skin shifted between red anger and purple distress. There must be a way out of this, she muttered. I need to think. She went to her private garden. It was filled with plants from 100 worlds. The air was sweet with strange perfumes. Here, among the flowers that changed color like her skin, Jia always found peace. But not today. Today, all she could think about was tomorrow. Meeting this human, this Hyun. The very thought made her sick. As the three suns set, casting long shadows through her garden, Jia made a decision. She would meet this human. She would be polite, as her position required, but she would find a way to make him reject her. If her father would not break this arrangement, then the human must. Yuna, she called. Her helper appeared instantly. Yes, princess. Find out everything you can about humans, their weaknesses, the things they fear, the things they find ugly or offensive. Yuna looked worried. Princess, what are you planning? Jia's skin turned a determined orange. I'm planning to save myself from the worst mistake of my life. If I must meet this Hyun tomorrow, I will make sure he never wants to see me again. As night fell, Jia looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, the human homeworld. So far away, yet suddenly too close. I will not marry a human, she whispered to the stars. I will not. But deep inside, a small voice reminded her of her father's words. Duty to the Empire comes first. Always. She pushed the thought away. There had to be another way, and she would find it. Tomorrow would decide her fate, and Jia was determined that no human would be part of her future. The human embassy stood out among the flowing buildings of the celestial capital. It was all straight lines and sharp angles. Jia thought it looked ugly and out of place, just like humans themselves, she thought. Her skin was a forced calm blue as her royal ship landed at the embassy. She had spent hours preparing for this meeting, not to look good, but to look scary. She wore her most formal royal clothes and all her rank symbols. She wanted the human to see her power. She had even painted special patterns on her skin that humans often found confusing to look at. Remember, princess, said Yuna as they prepared to exit the ship, you must at least pretend to be polite. I know my duty, Jia said coldly. I will be polite, but I will also be myself. 4 royal guards with shining armor walked out first. Then Jia stepped out, all 4 of her arms moving in the formal pattern that showed her royal status. Yuna followed close behind. A group of humans waited for them. In front stood an older human that Jia recognized as Ambassador Li from the council meeting. Beside him was a younger human male. This must be Hyun. Jia studied him quickly. He was tall for a human, with dark hair and eyes. His face showed no expression, which surprised her. Most humans showed their feelings clearly on their faces. This one seemed controlled. Princess Jia. Ambassador Li bowed. Thank you for honoring us with your presence. May I present my son, Hyun? The younger human stepped forward and bowed deeply. Princess Jia, I am honored to meet you. His voice was deeper than she expected, and he spoke her language perfectly. Another surprise. Hyun, she said, not bowing back. I hope this meeting will be educational for both of us. Ambassador Li smiled nervously. Perhaps you would like to show the princess our garden, Hyun. We have brought many plants from Earth. Some might interest Her Highness. Hyun nodded. If the princess would follow me. Jia waved her guards back. I will go alone. Wait here. Yuna looked worried, but stayed with the guards as Jia followed Hyun into the embassy. They walked in silence through metal hallways until they reached a glass door. Hyun opened it, and Jia was hit with a wave of strange smells. They stepped into a room full of plants she had never seen before. Earth plants, Hyun explained. We try to keep a piece of home with us. Jia looked around. Some of the plants had bright colors. Others were small and green. None of them moved or changed color like the plants on her world. They are very still, she said. Not all of them, Hyun said. He pointed to a small plant with leaves that closed when he touched them. This one moves. Jia watched with interest despite herself. Why does it do that? To protect itself, Hyun said. It's a defense mechanism. Jia touched the plant with one of her hands. The leaves closed again. Interesting. On my world, plants hunt and eat small animals. They don't just defend. Earth is different, Hyun said simply. An awkward silence fell between them. Jia decided it was time to start her plan. Let's speak honestly, she said suddenly. You don't want this marriage any more than I do. Hyun's calm expression changed slightly. He looked surprised. What makes you think that? Why would you want it? I'm not human. I have 4 arms. My skin changes color. I can read minds. We are too different. Hyun smiled for the first time. It changed his whole face. Those differences don't bother me, princess. Jia's skin flushed with frustration. This wasn't going as planned. Well, they should. And you should know that I find humans ugly and primitive. Your short lives, your strange bodies, your emotional outbursts, it all disgusts me. She expected him to be angry or hurt. Instead, he laughed. It was a warm sound that filled the garden. What's so funny? Jia demanded, her skin turning red. I'm sorry, Hyun said, stopping his laugh. It's just, I expected this. My father warned me that you would try to make me reject the marriage. Jia felt embarrassed. Her plan was so obvious. And you're not offended? No, Hyun said. I understand. I didn't ask for this either, Your Highness. That surprised her. You didn't? No. I was studying at the Earth Academy of Xenobiology. I want to be a doctor who can treat different species. This political marriage was my father's idea, not mine. Jia moved to a bench and sat down. Hyun sat on another bench across from her. Then why agree to it? The same reason you haven't completely refused. Duty, Hyun replied. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small container. Would you like to try something from Earth? We call them cherries. Jia was curious despite herself. She took the container and examined the small red fruits inside. They're safe for my kind. Yes, I checked your biology records before you came. They're completely safe. Gia took one of the cherries and put it in her mouth. The taste was amazing, sweet and a little sour. Her skin flashed with pleasure before she could stop it. "You like it?" Hyun said, smiling again. "It's not bad," Gia admitted. She ate another one. "So you were studying to be a doctor?" Hyun nodded. "Yes. I've always been fascinated by how different species work, how their bodies function, how they heal. The universe is full of amazing life forms, including celestials," Jia asked, raising an eyebrow. "Especially celestials," Hyun said. "Your adaptive skin, your telepathic abilities, your four-arm structure, it's all fascinating from a scientific view." Jia felt herself warming to him despite her plans. He didn't look at her with disgust or fear like most humans did. He looked at her with interest, real interest. "What will you do if this marriage happens?" she asked. "Give up your studies?" "No," Hyun said firmly. "I would continue them here. Your world has some of the best biological research in the galaxy, and I could learn so much about celestial medicine." Jia hadn't thought of that. A human doctor who understood celestial biology could be useful. That's practical thinking. "I try to be practical," Hyun said. "This marriage may not be what either of us wanted, but we can make the best of it. Find ways to benefit both our peoples." Jia stood up and walked around the garden. Her four hands touched different plants as she thought. This human was not what she expected. He was calm, intelligent, and didn't seem bothered by her differences. "You know," she said finally, "most humans can't even look at all four of my arms without getting confused. They don't know where to focus." Hyun smiled. "I've trained myself to see all of you. It's important in medicine to see the whole patient, not just the parts that are familiar." A celestial guard entered the garden and bowed. "Princess, it's time to return to the palace. The Emperor has requested your presence." Jia nodded. "I'll be right there." She turned back to Hyun. "This meeting was not what I expected." "Is that good or bad?" Hyun asked. "I'm not sure yet," Jia answered honestly. Her skin had settled into a thoughtful purple color. "But I suppose we will meet again." "I look forward to it, Princess," Hyun said, bowing. As Jia walked back to her ship, she felt confused. She had gone to the embassy ready to hate the human, ready to make him hate her. Instead, she found herself interested, not in marriage, that was still unthinkable. But Hyun himself was not what she had expected. "How was the meeting?" Yuna asked as they boarded the ship. "Strange," Jia said. "He's different from other humans." "Different good or different bad?" Jia looked out the window as the ship took off. She could see Hyun standing with his father, watching her leave. "Just different," she said. "And I'm not sure what to do about that." A week passed since Jia met Hyun. The palace was busy with preparations for a big celebration. The Emperor had invited important people from many planets to announce the engagement between his daughter and the human. Jia's skin often turned dark gray with worry as she watched workers set up decorations and prepare food. "You should be happy, Princess," Yuna said as she helped Jia dress for dinner. "The human seems nice." "Nice doesn't matter," Jia said. "He's still human. Our marriage is still impossible." But Jia had to admit, at least to herself, that she had thought about Hyun often since their meeting. He wasn't like other humans she had met. He was calm. He didn't fear her. He seemed to respect her culture. Her thoughts were interrupted when a guard rushed into her room without knocking. "Princess, you must come quickly. There's trouble at the main gate." Jia followed the guard through the palace halls. She could hear shouting as they got closer to the main entrance. When they arrived, she saw a large crowd of celestials blocking the gate. They held signs with angry messages about humans. "No human in the royal family," they shouted. "Protect our pure blood." On the other side of the gate stood Hyun, Ambassador Lee, and several human guards. They had come for the dinner invitation but couldn't get past the angry crowd. Emperor Day arrived at the same time as Jia. His skin was dark purple with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. An older celestial stepped forward from the crowd. Jia recognized him as Lord Quan, one of her distant relatives who had always wanted his own daughter to marry into the direct royal line. "Your Majesty," Lord Quan bowed. "We are here to protect the royal family from this mistake. Humans are beneath us. This marriage will weaken our empire and insult our ancestors." The emperor's 4 eyes narrowed. "You dare to question my decision?" "The people question it," Lord Quan said, waving at the crowd. "Look how many have come to protest." Jia looked at the faces in the crowd. Some were angry, but others seemed confused, like they weren't sure why they were there. Something felt wrong. The emperor waved his guards forward. "Clear this crowd. Now." As the guards moved forward, someone in the crowd threw a small object. It flew through the air and landed near the humans. There was a flash of bright light, and then thick smoke filled the air. "Attack!" someone shouted. The crowd surged forward. Jia couldn't see clearly through the smoke, but she heard fighting. Her guards pulled her back for safety, but she pushed them away. "Father," she called, worried for the emperor. A hand grabbed her arm. She turned, ready to fight, but it was Hyun. His face had a small cut, and his clothes were dirty from the smoke. "Princess, we need to get to safety," he said urgently. "This is a planned attack." "My father," she started, "is with his royal guards," Hyun finished. "They're taking him to the secure room. We need to go too. This way." He pulled her toward a side door. 2 of her guards followed. As they ran through a hallway, 3 figures in dark clothes jumped out in front of them. They weren't celestials or humans, but another alien race, shadows, known for their skill as fighters for hire. "Give us the princess," one of them said in a rough voice. The 2 celestial guards stepped forward, but the shadows were fast. They knocked one guard down quickly. The other guard fought longer, but was also defeated. Jia stood her ground. All 4 of her arms moved into fighting position. She had been trained to defend herself since she was young. "Stay behind me," Hyun said, stepping in front of her. "I don't need your protection, human," Jia said, moving beside him. "I can fight." Before either of them could act, the shadows attacked. They moved incredibly fast. One of them hit Hyun hard, sending him against the wall. The other 2 came for Jia. She blocked the first attack with her upper arms and struck back with her lower arms. She hit one shadow in the face, making him step back, but the other grabbed 2 of her arms. The third shadow recovered and joined the fight again. Jia was strong, but fighting 3 trained killers was too much. They were about to overpower her when suddenly one of them fell to the ground. Hyun had gotten up and attacked from behind. He moved with surprising speed for a human. "Run," he shouted to Jia. "I won't leave you," she said, surprising herself with the words. Together, they fought the remaining shadows. Jia was shocked at how well Hyun fought. He didn't have her strength or 4 arms, but he was quick and smart. He used the shadows' moves against them. Finally, only one shadow was left standing. He looked at Jia and Hyun, then turned and ran away. Hyun was breathing hard. "Are you hurt?" he asked Jia. "No," she said. She looked at him with new eyes. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "Part of diplomatic training," he said, plus some extra lessons after a similar situation on another planet. Before she could ask more questions, palace guards arrived. The emperor was with them. "Jia," he called, his skin changing from worried gray to relieved blue when he saw she was safe. "What happened here?" "Shadows, father," Jia said. "They tried to take me." Hyun helped fight them off. The emperor looked at Hyun with surprise and respect. "You protected my daughter." Hyun bowed. "We protected each other, Your Majesty." More guards arrived with a prisoner, Lord Quan. His skin was pale with fear. "We found evidence in his rooms," a guard reported. "He hired the shadows to kidnap the princess." He hoped to blame humans for her disappearance. The Emperor's skin turned deep red with rage. Take him to the prison. He will be judged for treason. As Lord Quan was led away, he shouted, "The marriage is still wrong. Many agree with me. This won't be the last attempt." Later that night, after the injured were treated and the palace was secure again, Jia sat in her garden. Her mind was racing with thoughts about what had happened. She heard footsteps and looked up. Hyun stood at the entrance to the garden. His face had a bandage where he had been cut. "May I join you?" he asked. Jia nodded. He sat on a bench near her. "You surprised me today," she said after a long silence. "How so?" "You fought well. You were brave." She paused. "You could have run, saved yourself." Hyun shook his head. "That's not who I am." "Who are you then?" Jia asked. "I thought I knew what humans were like. Simple, weak, emotional. But you're different." "Maybe we're not so different, you and I," Hyun said. "We both care about our people. We both want peace. We both did not want this marriage but are trying to make the best of it." Jia's skin changed to a thoughtful purple. "Lord Quan won't be the last to oppose us. There are others who think like him, both celestials and humans. Your people probably have groups that hate the idea of you marrying me too." "Yes," Hyun admitted. "There are human groups who think we should stay separate from other species. So what do we do?" Jia asked. "We show them they're wrong," Hyun said simply. "We show them that different doesn't mean worse. That together, we can be stronger than apart." Jia looked at him for a long time. For the first time, she saw him not as a human, but as a person. A brave, smart person who had fought beside her, who had respected her strength instead of trying to control it. "Maybe," she said slowly, her skin turning a new color, a soft pink she had never shown before. "Maybe we can." As they sat there in the quiet garden, something changed between them. Not love, not yet, but understanding, respect, and the first small seed of something that might, one day, grow into more. The day of the engagement ceremony arrived. The palace was full of important guests from many planets. Security was very tight after the attack. Guards checked everyone who entered. Jia stood in her room as Yuma helped her put on special ceremonial clothes. The outfit had been in her family for generations. Every royal engagement was celebrated with the same clothes. "You look beautiful, princess," Yuma said, stepping back to look at Jia. Jia's skin was a mix of colors, some blue from calm, some yellow from worry, and some pink that had started showing up whenever she thought of Hyun. She wasn't sure what that pink meant, and it confused her. "Do you think this is a mistake, Yuna?" Jia asked quietly. Yuna looked surprised. "A few weeks ago, you were sure it was. Has something changed?" Jia turned to look out the window. From here, she could see the garden where she and Hyun had talked after the attack. "I don't know. He's not what I expected." "That's a good thing, isn't it?" Yuna smiled. Before Jia could answer, there was a knock at the door. A guard entered and bowed. "Princess, the ceremony will begin soon. Your father is waiting." Jia took a deep breath. "I'm ready." She walked through the palace halls, her four hands gently holding her ceremonial clothes. Guards lined the way. Guests watched her pass, whispering to each other. Some looked happy. Others did not. The great hall was decorated with flowers from both celestial and earth gardens. The three suns shone through the large windows, filling the room with light that made everything glow. Emperor Dai stood at the front of the hall. His skin was the royal purple of formal occasions. Beside him stood Ambassador Li and Hyun. Hyun wore human formal clothes, black and white, simple compared to the colorful celestial outfits, but he stood tall and confident. When he saw Jia, he smiled. That smile still changed his whole face, making it warm and friendly. As Jia walked down the center of the room toward them, whispers followed her. She can't really want to marry a human. The emperor must be forcing her. It won't last. Jia kept her head high. She remembered what Hyun had said in the garden. They needed to show everyone that different didn't mean worse. When she reached the front, she stood beside Hyun. Emperor Dai stepped forward to speak to the crowd. "Today, we celebrate a new beginning," he said in a strong voice. "A union between the Celestial Empire and the Terran Alliance that will bring peace and understanding to our peoples." As he spoke, Jia noticed something strange. A Celestial near the back of the room was moving oddly. His skin was changing colors too quickly, like he was very nervous. His hand was reaching inside his coat. Jia tensed. She looked at Hyun and saw that he had noticed too. Their eyes met for a second. Without speaking, they both understood the danger. The Emperor was still talking when the Celestial pulled out a small device. Jia recognized it immediately. A sonic disruptor, a weapon that could hurt anyone close by. "Look out!" Jia and Hyun shouted at the same time. Guards turned to see the threat, but they were too far away. The Celestial raised the weapon. Jia moved without thinking. She pushed her father down with 2 hands while her other 2 hands reached for a heavy metal decoration nearby. She threw it at the attacker. At the same time, Hyun jumped in front of Ambassador Lee. The metal decoration hit the Celestial's hand, knocking the weapon down. It went off, but aimed at the floor instead of the people. The room erupted in chaos. Guards rushed to capture the attacker. Guests ran for the exits. The Emperor's personal guards surrounded him, pulling him to safety. In the confusion, Jia lost track of Hyun. She looked around frantically, worried he might be hurt. Then she felt a hand on her arm. It was him. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes checking her for injuries. "I'm fine," she said. She realized her skin was bright pink now, and she couldn't hide it. "You?" "Fine," he said. "Good throw." "Good jump," she replied. They stood there looking at each other while chaos moved around them. Something had changed. In that moment of danger, they had acted as one. They had protected each other's families without hesitation. Later, after the attacker was taken away and calm returned, the Emperor called Jia and Hyun to his private room. Ambassador Lee was there too. "Today's events have made something very clear," Emperor Daz said. "There are people who strongly oppose this union. The question is, what do we do now?" Ambassador Lee looked serious. "We could delay the engagement, give people more time to accept the idea. Or," the Emperor said, "we could move forward more quickly, show our strength." Jia and Hyun exchanged looks. Jia spoke first. "Father, may I speak with Hyun alone before we decide?" The Emperor looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. We will wait outside." When they were alone, Jia turned to Hyun. "This isn't what either of us wanted," she said directly. "No," Hyun agreed. "It wasn't. But things have changed, haven't they?" Jia's skin was that same soft pink. "I've changed. The way I see you has changed." Hyun nodded. "For me too. When I first heard about this arrangement, I thought of you as a celestial princess. Nothing more. Now I see you as Jia. Brave, strong, intelligent Jia." His words made her skin glow brighter pink. "I don't love you," she said honestly. "Not yet. I don't know if I ever will. But I respect you. I like you. And maybe that's enough to start with." "It is for me," Hyun said. He held out his hand. A human gesture of agreement. "Partners then. We'll face whatever comes together." Jia reached out with one of her hands and took his. It felt strange, his single hand in her 4-fingered one. Different, but not bad. "Partners," she agreed. They called the Emperor and Ambassador back in. "We want to continue with the engagement," Jia said firmly. "And we want to set a date for the marriage. Soon." The Emperor's skin showed surprise, a light yellow color. "Are you sure, daughter? A few weeks ago, you said." "I know what I said." Jia's skin was now a confident orange. "Things have changed. I've changed." She looked at Hyun. I still think humans are strange. I still think our differences are many. But I've learned that different can be good. Different can be strong. The princess and I believe that together we can show both our peoples that cooperation is better than conflict, Hyun added. But we need your support. The emperor and ambassador looked at each other. Then the emperor's skin changed to a happy blue. You have it. Both of you. That evening, Jia stood again at the window of her royal chambers. The three suns were setting, painting the sky in beautiful colors. Hyun stood beside her, watching the sunset too. It's beautiful, he said. Yes, Jia agreed. What are sunsets like on Earth? Similar, but different, Hyun said. We only have one sun, so the colors are less complex, but still beautiful in their own way. Jia thought about that. One sun, not three. Different, but still beautiful. Like them. Will you teach me more about Earth? She asked. If I'm going to visit someday, I should understand it better. I'd like that, Hyun said. And will you teach me more about celestial culture? Yes, Jia said. She looked at him and let her skin show her true feelings. A mix of blue calm, orange confidence, and that new pink color that she was starting to understand meant something like happiness when she was with him. Jia thought back to her words from weeks ago. Father, I'll marry anyone but the human. How wrong she had been. There was no one else she would rather face the future with than this human who had shown her that true strength came not from being the same, but from bringing different strengths together. As the last light of the three suns faded, Jia and Hyun stood side by side, watching the stars appear. Their journey was just beginning. It would not be easy, but they would face it together, the celestial princess and her human partner.